Every gambler knows that the secret to surviving,
I don't wanna take advice from fools.
you always won every time you placed a bet.
Money, that's what I want.
I'm Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. Over the past couple months, a lot of members of the Atlanta media have contacted me about the story, or more accurately, the non-story, about Georgia Senate Majority Leader Chip Rogers having been a sports handicapper in the past. So media, here is everything you've always wanted to know and never wanted to know about Chip Rogers and the sports handicapping industry. So sit down, shut your pie holes, and take note. Yes, I am here to say it's true. Chip Rogers has worked quite a few years in an industry that has a lot of scoundrels, snakes, and miscreants. But enough about his years in the media and as a politician. Let's talk about when he was working in an honest industry, sports handicapping. There is nothing wrong with sports handicapping. I know there are a lot of people out there who have a moral opposition to sports gambling or any form of gambling. Okay, so what? Even the lamestream media has hired high-profile people who are sports handicappers to work for them. There is no debate the single most successful pregame show in the history of sports television was the NFL Today back in the 1970s with Brent Musburger, Irv Cross, Phyllis George, and arguably the most popular member, Jimmy the Greek, who was a sports handicapper. NBC was getting crushed in the ratings. They said, we've got to hire a sports handicapper ourselves, a guy by the name of Pete Axthelm. CNN, on their staff for quite a few years, had Danny Sheridan, and right now ESPN has Hank Goldberg. Sports handicappers have long been a member of the lamestream media going back to the 1970s and probably before that. So a total non-story. Now, I will admit, because politics is about values, and here in the state of Georgia, in which I am a resident, the lottery was not even legal until 1992. We also live in a state that in 2012, finally, buying alcohol on Sundays became legal. We had blue laws up until very recently, but guess who was leading the overthrow, who was leading it? Alcohol sales would be legal on Sunday. That's right, Chip Rogers. So he's already bumped heads with the Christian Coalition, and now, as a result of the fact that he had ties to the sports gambling industry, I know the head of the Georgia Christian Coalition has called for his resignation, not as a state senator, but as the Senate Majority Leader. That is their right. You have every right to be opposed to buying beer on Sundays or to people betting on sports, but there is nothing wrong with the fact that Chip was a sports handicapper. Now, what is kind of a minor story is Chip was not really a reputable sports handicapper. He was more of a tout and not a handicapper. He is caught on tape saying he's hit 80% of his plays and he's got inside information. So the hard sell, the fact that he was kind of on the seedy end of the sports handicapping industry, okay, that is a fairly legitimate story, except it was at the turn of the century. That's more than 10 years ago. If that is the biggest skeleton he's got in his closet, then I say elect him President of the United States. Heck, elect him Czar of the world. He was a little overzealous. I understand that. I really didn't appreciate his explanation that he was, quote-unquote, only an actor. That's stretching the truth. But I know where he's been as far as not having total editorial control of your content. I got my start back in the 1980s as a sports handicapper on the score phones. Back in the late 1990s, it was bought out by a notorious scam-decapper who cannot be named, and he started telling all the handicappers affiliated with the score phone, you better start doing more of a hard sell if it's a high-profile game like Monday Night Football or the Bowls, NBA playoffs. You're going to love the side in the total, whether your handicapping techniques say you do or not. So I know what it's like to not have total editorial control of your advertisements. Again, fairly forgivable as far as I'm concerned from Chip Rogers' standpoint. Now, if there is a story that the media has really missed on, that's his association with John Edens, a.k.a. Johnny DeMarco. Look, I'm 46 years old, 47. I don't really even remember how old I am. I know I look much younger than that. What I look like I'm about 23, 24 at the most. but I've been on this earth 46, 47 years. I don't know if I've ever met a more dishonest person than John Edens. Now, John Edens was who he was involved with in this real estate transaction. Pretty shaky. I'm going to tell you flat out, John Edens is sewage. And the only people who should object to that description would be somebody who is perhaps an excrement rights activist. I would understand that you are offended by fecal matter being compared to John Edens, and I apologize. Chip, you do have some serious questions. John Edens is frankly your Jeremiah Wright. He's your Weather Underground type guy. The fact that you maintain a relationship with a dishonest person and a scammer like John Edens, as somebody who's agreed with you, look, I first met Chip Rogers back in 1988. We've agreed politically back then, and for the most part, we agree politically now. Chip is somebody who I would theoretically support for governor, or I've heard, maybe U.S. senator. He would possibly run for. But you're maintaining a relationship with John Edens. There's no question there's some smoke there. Is there fire? I don't know. But under the best possible scenario, you use bad judgment, not getting that creature in your rearview mirror. So that is a fairly legitimate issue that I really have no problems with the media bringing up. But yet they're so busy focusing on the fact that you're a sports handicapper. So what? They're probably missing the bigger story on this. Now, as far as rumors that he ran a sportsbook operation, I was asked that by the people who first broke this story. What are they called? The Atlanta Underground, I believe, the news story, the guys from Emory. I spoke to the kid who did the story, his professor, very accomplished professor. Chip, I know you said that the story was broken by a left-leaning website that may or may not be true. They did bring up some fairly legitimate issues. I thought it was kind of fair, but I will say this. Didn't appreciate, they tried to mislead me. They were trying to tell me they were doing a story on John Edens. This story had nothing to do with Chip Rogers, but it was quite obvious the direction the questioning was going. They were trying to tie Edens to you and trying to bring you down. So I will admit that they did come across as having a little bit of an agenda, but ultimately your ties to Edens are something that could haunt your political career, and they are a legitimate issue. But they're the only ones who brought up, they tried to ask me if I knew that you had an ownership in any sports book. I've been an insider in this industry for 2 decades. I had never once heard any whispers that Chip had any direct affiliation with a sports book whatsoever. I Googled it myself, and the only whisper I saw was somebody, an anonymous comment on an AJC.com article about you, where somebody in the comments section implied that there were, quote-unquote, rumors that you ran a sports book years ago. As far as I know, it is a total non-story. It's false. I would say the odds are at best 25-1 that he was ever in any management capacity with a sports book. Now, they have said, well, you did advertise for Oasis Sportsbook. Look, a lot has changed in this industry. When offshore sports books first became about, and I mean a lot of people, including major publications, newspaper and magazine publications, TV stations, radio stations, and even radio networks, they all took advertising for offshore sportsbook because we thought it was analogous to going to Amsterdam. You can go to Amsterdam and do things that are very much illegal in this country, and you're in Amsterdam. It's outside of the jurisdiction. So if you do something in Amsterdam, it is not illegal. You can't get arrested in the United States for doing something that is legal in Amsterdam. That's basically the way we felt about sports books. If you're placing a bet with an offshore sports book where they were all legal where they reside, in the jurisdictions where they reside, they were legal, we thought it was well within the law. Now, unfortunately, regrettably, some district attorneys and prosecutors have disagreed on that. They say it is still illegal to post a bet from the United States. I know Catherine Holloway, I think is her name, Holloway, something like that, from St. Louis. She's among the prosecutors who are aggressively prosecuting those who have taken bets from U.S.-based citizens. Legal scholars are still debating whether it was or wasn't illegal, but the fact that he was a spokesperson for something that we thought was 100% legal at the time, cut the guy a break. Again, as far as I'm concerned, a total non-story. So again, as far as I'm concerned, all the media digging they've done, maybe a witch hunt, maybe not, The only legitimate story is the one that they're not pursuing. Senator Rogers is somebody who I agree with you politically, somebody who, liked you personally when we knew each other fairly well a couple decades ago. Still think you got some questions to answer as far as your personal relationship with this scoundrel, John Edens, and this whole explanation on Hotel Johnny DeMarco out there in Calhoun. That is pretty shaky. That is the only potential story there. Okay, he wasn't the most reputable sports handicapper ever. That was a decade ago. Big deal. The ties of the sports book. Don't think he was ever involved in any management. The fact he was a spokesperson for one. Yeah, I didn't really like his explanation that he was, quote unquote, only an actor. Major non-story here. That is it. End of the discussion. Come on, media. Move on to something else. There is no story there. Visit me at offshoreinsiders.com, www.offshoreinsiders.com.